In this part of the video, we're going to finalize the user interface. Right now, this is what has been implemented for the user interface. However, when we get the directions, and you saw that in the last part, we read the information from the web service, transferred it into the objects. However, we have not drawn this table, and also we have not drawn the information on the map right here, starting point, target point. So that is something we haven't done yet, and that will be the focus of this video. As mentioned before, we'll use FNC Maps for the map functionality. This is a leaflet map, so there's no API key. This is also the appearance that you get without any cost to you. As the backend delivers all the coordinates for this route, we don't have to use any additional web services from Google or anybody else. The backend delivers everything. And then this table here, these little icons are Bootstrap icons. And that's what I'm going to start with before we deep dive into creating this table. And it is a table. It is not a Bootstrap grid, which would be an alternative. So the current implementation here, let me get rid of the full screen, is not using responsive design per se. It is just making the table smaller. With the number of columns, I felt pretty confident doing it this way. However, you could also replace the table with divs. That's something you could do in your own implementation if you want a truly responsive implementation using a responsive grid and not an HTML table like I'm doing here. So looking at this implementation, at the code that is being generated, clicking here, it is really a table that is being generated, a Bootstrap table. And that's the second thing I'm going to look at in the Bootstrap documentation first. After looking at the documentation, how it is all coming together, we'll look at the source code. So let's start with Bootstrap. We go to getbootstrap.com. and go to icons. Rather new, I don't know how new they are, but by now Bootstrap offers 2,000 or over 2,000 icons. And you simply scroll down and enter what you're looking for. For example, I entered route. Nothing that was there. For example, I had a car. So we could, here we have a car icon. And then what I used was the signpost. Pretty sure I did use the signpost. It should be somewhere, maybe signpost. Here we go. This is an icon that I use. So these identifiers are actually key. So you search for the icon, click on the icon, and then there you see all the opportunities that you have to include this into your HTML. And the easiest way is the one that I'm picking right here. I copy this HTML tag. The Bootstrap framework here makes use of the iHTML tag, which is usually used for italic font. But because of the fact that we use the class BI, which is Bootstrap icons, and then the actual name of the icon. So Bootstrap icons, Bootstrap icon, signpost. You have other opportunities to include this into your HTML. You can copy the HTML like this, and this will draw the icon as an SVG. You see, this is the SVG path. This, in my opinion, is better suited if you bundle it inside of your framework in some other way. I just don't think this looks great if you render this kind of stuff into the table. So also, I have seen it with React, for example, where it makes sense to use this kind of approach. But for TMS WEB Core, I find this the best approach. Interesting, you can put this anywhere. You can put it in a heading, smaller heading, in text, in links, in buttons. Everything's possible. This is what makes this icon set so great. It's so cool that it's integrated into Bootstrap now. So there's other icon sets that you can use, Google Material, and then there's also Font Awesome. All these have different licensing, but the Bootstrap one, as far as I know, you can use all of the icons in all your applications without adding any specific license. One more thing though, if you use this HTML tag without importing one more style sheet, nothing is going to happen, as you might have thought. So we go back to icons, and if we scroll down, well hidden, I think, or we don't need to scroll down, we can actually click on install. And there is again the CDN link, and this is the link right here. So we copy this into the clipboard. And then if we go to our TMS WEB Core project, to the index.html file, into the code, and there should be somewhere, because I've edited, of course, here is Bootstrap, and here is the link to Bootstrap icons. As soon as you insert this line, all the tags that are specified or shown with the icons, for example, you want to insert this one right here, you can use this HTML in order to get this icon. And the height of the icon matches the font size that is currently set inside of the HTML. That makes it great. Like, same for the color and everything. So you simply insert it into the button specification and you have your icon in with the right color on the button. It's really, really easy to use. Second, we're going to use a table. And tables, if we go to the documentation, I'm going to 5.3. We scroll down and look at tables. So this is the basic table design, simply using table with a class table as necessary. Just using table does not suffice. And then the structure is a little bit different from the initial HTML that I learned when I was in college. There was no T-head and T-body. I don't know when that was introduced, or if I simply had literature that didn't mention this. I don't know. However, I never learned T-head and T-body in college. So this is, for me, this is rather new. I learned you have a row, and then you either have a TH for table header, or a TR with a T, where is it? Down here. TD with table data. That's what I learned. A little bit different from the specification that Bootstrap uses. Still, it's not really complicated. You have the T-head, which specifies the header right here. So the first row, so to speak. And then you have each row starting with a TR tag. And then the data, as you can see right here, is always inside of a TD tag. That's it. And this is what we'll generate dynamically. Instead of just writing the HTML as a string, we will use the JavaScript DOM to generate this. It sounds more complicated than it really is, to be honest with you. If you look at the code, I didn't wrap the code in a separate class. In my TMS WEB Core book, I refactor everything into a separate class that can be compared to a component that renders the table into your document, onto your page, so to speak. That is an even better approach, but I wanted to limit this to the essentials, what you need to know to dynamically create content. And if you're interested, consider purchasing the book and going even a step farther, how you can bundle everything in classes to make it reusable for other projects and not only that one. And this is exactly the point. Strictly speaking, I should not have put everything into the form class, into the T form directions class. I did. It's all in the update table method. The update table method creates the table. And another thing I didn't call a method called update map. Instead, because I'm iterating the whole data structure in order to update the table, I update the map at the same time. Please forgive me. It's definitely, performance-wise, it's definitely better, but still, Holger could have separated these things into different methods. However, I wanted to keep it simple for you to reproduce so that I can show you one method step by step. And please feel free to refactor everything. I won't take it personally. I know that this isn't the best refactored code. But that's not the aim of this tutorial. I want to teach you or show you how you can create content dynamically, how you can update a map. These are the essentials that I want to carry over to you. The key element, and the pun is intended in this case, is the TJS element. Everything on your web page that you see is an element and is derived of TJS element. That's in TMS WEB Core, the base class. And I think even in JavaScript, we have JS element. If we go into the how a page is being constructed, so if we go into the browser and look for JS element, I'm quite sure the web API element, here we see we have element and we have a node. Those are the basic classes, so to speak, of JavaScript, and element is the representation of anything that you see on the page. Just think of it as that. So looking at the application that we created here, let me start it. Each of these, like this input control is an element, this input control is an element, this label is an element. Everything on the page is an element. So thinking of our source code and the HTML that is attached to the design, each and every one of these tags is an element. And each element has content in between. So for example, looking at this label element here, this element has the class form label, and for the attribute for, the value is input origin, and the value of the tag is origin. To be more precise, there is inner text and inner HTML, if I'm not mistaken. So this is literally what is inside, in between the opening tag and the closing tag. The most important thing to remember is that each and every element has children. So for example, this div tag here has two children, the label element and another input element. And that's exactly how we are going to build the table. We are going to start with this div element right here. And in this div element, we're going to add a table element. So think about it like this. And we're going to assign a certain class, just like shown in the documentation. And then we're going to add a t-head as a child of the table class. And we're going to add a t-body as a child of the table class. And then we're going to add children to the head and children to the body. And that's how we can generate the whole table. That's the beauty of it. Strictly speaking, that's what TMS WEB Core components do internally. They generate elements to show content on the page. And you might wonder why I do this manually. Well, first of all, I want to give you more of the internals of TMS WEB Core, how flexible it really is, that you're not bound by the components. If you can't find a control that matches your needs, that matches, for example, the CSS framework that you use. For example, there's not only Bootstrap. There might be other CSS frameworks. And the components, or controls, I should say, rather, that TMS provides, for example, the table control here, is more or less built for Bootstrap. Because if we look at the form class right now, you can see that TMS right now is focusing on Bootstrap. And if you want to use something else, it might be easier for you not to use the grid component or table component that TMS provides, but to generate the content dynamically, or even write your own components. That's also something you can do. That's the next step, to basically bundle these things that we do manually here, wrap them, and then create a component based on these things. So for me, this is the in-between step to component development for stuff that I might need again, but still it's not very specific for an application, so that don't make it a component. As this is TMS WEB Core and it uses the Path2JS compiler, we have to do all variable declarations at the beginning of the method. I know purists love it. I'm more here, in this case, it would be much more advantageous if we would be able to declare the variables a little bit lower and not all in the beginning, because I have to do a lot of scrolling. In order not to scroll all the time, just remember the hook is going to be a JS element, and we will link this to this tag. That will be the hook where we generate everything. So all that we generate is going to be a child of that element. And you might have already noticed that there's also a TJS HTML element. And if we look at code completion, hopefully it's not going to disappoint us. Lhook is different in the way that we don't have any events on something. And we also, so that is the major difference from HTML elements to JS elements. So usually when doing this, I use HTML elements to have the ability to tie events to the element as well. Because if we look, for example, the table is defined as HTML element, we have all the events. And that's literally what you can do. If you want to add the ability that the user can click, we have the table built again. If you want to add the ability, for example, that the user can hover over the distance and then open a hint or something and show the miles instead of the kilometers, you would implement an event, and that event would be tied to the element that is drawn in the table, or you would tie it to the row. Something specific that, for example, if you go here, you see that the total distance is 0.9, and then here the total distance is 9.4, for example. And these kind of interactive elements can be added too by adding events to the elements. Also something to go deeper that I show in my book. So going from here, let's generate the table and draw on the map. So first of all, we get the root from the service manager. So at this point, we have full access to everything that was returned from the web service. That was the reason why we transferred everything into our own class. At this stage, we can work with the troot class and the tstep class. So we have the root in lroot, and the hook, we get that. And we get it using document. Document is something that is always available if you use the templates from TMS WEB Core. You can say document dot and then get element by ID, and then you can get a JS element for any element on your page. Or you can even directly get an HTML element. Or you can also get all the elements by a certain class, or by name, by tag name, and so on, or by namespace, because tags in HTML can also have namespaces. So this document is very powerful, and it matches. This is something we always tend to forget when working with TMS WEB Core. These things are all defined in the documentation from JavaScript. This is a JavaScript document, and all these things, just like the children, list of the children or child element count, all these things are available and accessible in TMS WEB Core. And again, this is not writing JavaScript code because we're having a compiler that checks everything for us. And in the last part, I even showed a means to get rid of these string constants to make sure that you're not having typos there if you use them over and over again. So lhook will literally point to this tag. This will be the div tag. The div tag will be referenced in lhook. And the easiest and quickest way to check that you did everything correctly is you could do this, comment everything out, all of the difficult code that I've written here. And the first step that we can take is that we simply say lhook inner HTML, meaning what happens is here. This is where we will write right there. That is the inner HTML. We set that to a string, to a format string, route found with total distance of meters. It will take you minutes to drive there. Then we insert these things from lroot. And that's the first thing we can do user interface wise to see that our approach works. Also note that we can use multi-line strings. At this point, the table is taken out of the equation. The table no longer is part of it. So if we click get directions, and this is now inside of our HTML tag. So this is the number of meters, and it will take us 120 minutes to drive there. Pretty optimistic. Okay, it's right now it's 7 p.m. on a Friday, so yes, it's possible to get there in 2 hours. Try to do that during rush hour. It's more like 4 hours. So let's see. Elements. and we click, and right here, and you can even verify what we generated. So hook table is what we hooked into, and then we changed the inner HTML of this tag and inserted the string in there. So that's, I gotta say it, I gotta emphasize it, that's how easy it is to dynamically generate content in on your pages without using controls. And you can generate anything here. You can use HTML text. And just so you know, to see using an icon, for example, so we go to Get Bootstrap, and we go to icons, and let's use arrow. So here, let's pick one of the arrows that is a little bit more, that is not one of the standard ones. I don't know, let's take this one, take the recycle one. So we would copy this. I'm using this because an arrow might be where you say like, hey, he's just using Unicode. So we paste this here. This is the HTML tag, BI recycle. Let's start this again. And you will see that now the icon will be part of the string, and the browser, the DOM, will automatically translate everything. So get directions, and there we go. There's our icon right here. That's how easy it is to insert icons from the Bootstrap icon set into your pages. Okay, let's remove that again. And also, let's comment it out. And this way we can go step by step through the whole generation process. And I can go rather quickly because you will have to study the code in detail afterwards anyways, because following at the same time generating all these loops that are intertwined is not fun. So I'm going to make this rather short, and you can investigate the code yourself in detail. So this is rather important. We set the inner HTML to nothing. That means no matter what would be in here, no matter how much it is, it could be a whole other document or a whole other table. So if you call this twice, the second time, let's compile this again, and I'll see what this line does. If this line were missing, the table wouldn't be new, and we would keep adding to the table. So let me show it working first, but I'm quite sure you'll understand it right away if you see the example. So we get the directions. And now we go to Miami Beach. We go from Miami Beach to Orlando, Florida, for example. Of course, that's in Miami, Florida. And the table will be replaced now. It will be a different table, see? And the route also changes now up the East Coast. And if we leave that in, that's just the funny thing. Don't clear the table. Start this again. Get the directions again. And then we go to, I don't know, from here, we go to Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Note that we start here, get directions, and it's different, right? Because we add there, but the other table is still there. See, we have this table and the other table because we didn't clear the tag. So this line is pretty important, and it clears anything that's in between. In my book, I also show a different approach where you iterate all the elements and remove them from the document. That is something that you can do as well. If you don't want to remove them all, you can iterate all the children of a tag. For example, you can do lhook.children right here, and then you can iterate them all and see which one you want to delete, which one you want to keep. Again, in my book, I also show how you add on top when you update stock, that you always see the stock trading, and you add at the top, not on the bottom. So the table is removing lines on the bottom and it's adding new lines on the top. So very interesting what kind of possibilities you have with writing these things dynamically. So after the hook, we need to actually generate the table. So we create an HTML element, called table. So we create an HTML element in LTable called table. And this will create this. That's all there is. And if there is no content, it literally will create this. And as soon as you keep adding on it to it, not adding on it, adding to it, we'll generate this. Table, table, hover. And of course, the end stays true. So I think it becomes pretty clear what we're doing. So we modify the object instances, and it leads to the DOM changing. And you might wonder now, isn't this gonna flicker like crazy when the document is being updated like this? No, it won't be, because and the trick, that's actually the trick. L-hook is visible on screen. So everything we do here is just changing object instances. It's not getting repainted. However, if we go to the bottom of the method, the last command is lhook append child ltable. At that point, we add the table as a child to the hook div tag, and that's the moment the browser shows it. So everything in between here, the whole assembly of all the tags, is not influencing the visual appearance of the application. It's definitely not going to affect the performance of the browser at that point. Of course, the JavaScript is being executed, and that is going to cause performance. However, it is not going to block the browser user interface that it flickers because every single tag is being updated all the time. That's not going to happen because we built the table first and then we add it to the document that it becomes visible. And this is technical. You can pick whatever approach you want. I define an array for the columns. This is just the HTML that is supposed to be added for each column. And for each column, first of all, I create the t-head tag, and then I create for each, not for each column, then I create the row. And inside of that row, which is inside of the head, I create a header element for each column. That's what I'm doing. And of course, the row needs to have each header element as a child. So in the loop to the row, I add all the header elements. And then finally, to t-head, I add the row as a child. And again, reverse order. I could. It would not break the code if I did this. It wouldn't change a thing because it's not visible. But let's assume t-head would be visible. Then that would be not advisable. Do it like this first. Add it last. As long as you do modifications on the objects, you don't want to see it on screen, or you don't want to show it on screen. And this way, you only see on screen what is already done and can be shown. But in this case, again, to emphasize it, we will add the whole table with all the rows, header plus body, at the end. And that's actually what I do. The body is being added and the header is being added to the table, also at the end. So the table object also doesn't have any content at first. Just before we add the table to the hook element, we add the header to the table element and the body to the table element. And this is intentional to make sure that we don't have a user interface that flickers or blocks the browser because the browser is updating the table all the time. Okay, I'm going to stop with performance, but it's really, really important. That's why I think I repeated it 3 times now. At this point, I won't bother or mention performance anymore. Actually, one more time I'm going to mention performance, and that's when it comes to the map. The table generation, I think we can neglect now. I generate the TRs, the TH, the T-body, and then add the children, and then basically each row gets like the different TDs, and then these tags are customized with certain classes. For example, text monospace, text right, so that these things here are right aligned, right? And then the last column right here, I also added a nice feature. If you select it, you select it all. So if you click here, you select the whole thing right away if you click on it. It's a nice new feature of Bootstrap. If you click on it, it's completely selected. The whole text, it also spans multiple lines right here. It's perfect. And also notice that the HTML from Google is being transferred over into the table because Google provides the bold tag and the smaller font here, that it's a toll road and all these things. So that is really, really fun to use in a web application. In a VCL application, you most likely would have to filter out the HTML tags if you don't have a TMS component, for example, which is able to interpret these HTML tags. So there's no more magic to this. There is just a loop over all the columns, over all the steps of the route, and for each step inside of the route, we generate a row in the table. That's how it works. No magic there. However, before we start doing that, we initialize the map. And what we do is we say map begin update. And strictly speaking, let me fix that because I was lazy when I was preparing the example. This should be wrapped in a try finally that the map end update is definitely being called. I want to make sure that that really, really works. And this, of course, needs to go inside of that as well. I mean, fixing things while recording a video is always good because it teaches right away how we can enhance the code. So the end update, we have to make sure that that is getting called. We do this for the same reason as with the browser controls. We want to make sure that the map only updates when it's completely customized, meaning we will be adding markers and polylines. And if we wouldn't be calling begin update, the map would be updated right away and that would flicker and it would basically result in a horrible performance. Considering how long your route is, it would take much, much longer than now, where all the commands are being collected, and then when end update is being called, the map is being redrawn with all the changes that have been made. Important, we clear all the markers that are on the map, and we also clear all the polylines. So we can do multiple routes without the routes basically being drawn on top of each other. And then we can use the coordinate record that LStep provides. That's why we added these FNC map specific types. We can literally say map.addPolyline, which expects a coordinate record array. So that's how easy it is to add lines for the coordinates of a specific step. It's just great. You iterate all the steps you have in LStep. The first step when we start, and then you can add a polyline, and then we can customize this polyline. And this data type here, lpoly, is the data type TMS FNC Maps polyline, which allows us to customize it. So at this point, we can set the stroke color, which is red, stroke width, 5 pixels, and the opacity, 60%. And that's it. We don't need to add it or anything. We already added it. We customize it afterwards using the instance that is returned to us. And that's all we need to do to add the line of the route. Here, we then add the columns to the table right here. And then finally, we add 2 markers. 1 marker for the origin and 1 marker for the destination. And to make it really, really visible where our route is, I basically say zoom to the bounds of the markers. So I make sure that the start and end of our route is visible in the area that is shown on screen. That's it. That's all there is that's needed to draw the route. And the reason why it is so simple is because we prepared our classes in a way that they return or have properties that return the data types that we need. Just think about the step, for example. Let me repeat this. I explained it in detail in the last part, but the step, each step has a coordinate array based on the coordinates that are in this step. So because of the fact that we get the right data type right away, In order to show it, it's a single line. Otherwise, you would have this looping and coordinate instance or array generation here on the form or in this update table class, which would be very disadvantageous, especially considering if you at some point make changes to these steps. And this way, your user interface stays unaffected. At this point, we're really already done. That's the whole application. This is all it takes to show a route on a map, any map, and in this case, we picked the Leaflet map to not have an API key and to show the instructions inside of a table. Of course, I'm quite sure there will be people watching this that have way better HTML design skills that I have and will create different tables. And the thing that I mentioned right in the beginning, in order to make this a responsive design, you would literally just replace these THs and TRs with divs, with columns and rows, and create a Bootstrap grid with the column tags according to the different media breakpoints that you want to insert. But this is just using a table to keep it simple, to get started with the whole area or topic area to generate these elements. I really hope you found this interesting to dynamically generate content in your TMS WEB Core applications. And in the final part of this video series, we're going to replace this FNC component with a base component that is part of TMS WEB Core now. It's really rather new. It is the Leaflet component. As you can see, it's not only part of FNC Maps, it's now part of TMS WEB Core, TWebLeafletMaps. Of course, the downside is you can't switch to another service. You're literally dedicated to Leaflet. And of course, you can't use the TMS FNC Maps data types, but that's for the next video. And I guarantee you, it won't be as complicated as it sounds. Take care.